Fraser Robinson, CEO of Beacon, a specialist technology company in supply chain visibility. Fraser, what is your first prediction for 2024?
First of all, Rory, thank you very much for having me. I think that I'd be remiss if I didn't point to the sort of the broader geopolitical macro environment. Supply chains are inexorably intertwined with global politics and macroeconomic effects. I think that while there's huge discussion and debate around, are interest rates going down? Are they remaining flat? What's the economy doing? Why is the stock market seemingly out of touch with the reality of people's pockets and so on? I think that on the macro front, I see a world in which 2024 is still uncertain. I think that the impacts on supply chains will continue to create volatility. I think that will continue to see freight rates bounce around. You've got the situation in the Red Sea, you've got elections in America, you've got elections in the UK, you've got Ukraine, you've got Middle East. So I think all of these things tie to uncertainty, which creates volatility. And I think that for supply chains and for businesses, I think that really leads to continuing need for agility, for data, for connected systems. It's the only way you can navigate volatility is if you have those sorts of technologies powering your businesses. But I think that the macro point is one of continued uncertainty is my prediction.
Fraser, what's your second prediction for 2024?
So my second prediction is really around the way in which businesses operate and individuals work together. It's a collaboration point, really. I think as a result of a lot of this volatility, as a result of the need to be more agile, and as a result of, quite frankly, post-COVID ways of working changing, people working remotely and so on, I think this collaboration theme continues to be of huge importance. I think we've seen that with products like Zoom, products like Slack. These are products that really feed into that collaboration theme. And it's interesting to see how their products are evolving to include not just things like chat, but video, whiteboarding. So I think this collaboration theme is still pretty emerging. And I think it will really be a theme that wraps around the core businesses at large, just how they're operating, how they're functioning, and how they're interacting with one another. Sort of a theme that wraps around a business theme, I suppose, is a way of working, collaboration theme.
And why do you think that's particularly important, I guess, in the context of supply chains?
Yeah, well, I think it ties back to this volatility point, which is in a world where things are more uncertain and you do need to be more agile. What that means is you need to be able to respond faster, be more prescriptive in your decision making, and you've got to have more data to be able to make those decisions. There's all of these things are the component parts of becoming agile. But a massive part of agility is the ability to collaborate with your peers, with your stakeholders, with your partners. This is what products like Slack have done so well. Basically said, email is too slow. We've got to go faster. And so I think this collaboration theme is very, very tightly intertwined with volatility and the need to be agile. So that's what the collaboration theme really means. How do you make decisions faster with the right data? And how do you communicate with immediacy with all those who need to share that decision with you? It's hard to do. And things like phones and email are proving to be too slow.
Let's assume then that accelerates at the expected pace. What do you think that results in for the supply chain industry?
I think it results in absolutely businesses being much more in tune with what's happening in the real world. I think it results in businesses being connected to their data and being connected, and I do mean literally connected data-wise and systems-wide with the outside world. And, I don't want to get ahead of my third prediction, but I'll sort of drop it in. I think that this opens the door to more AI-based interactions, because more connectivity, more data, more collaboration, it kind of opens that door for your chatbots and your AI-based recommendation engines to help make those decisions much more quickly, and in some instances predict outcomes. So I think all of these things coalesce around the same the same problem. Sorry, not the same problem, the same sort of vector, which is the need to become more agile. All of these things, when connected, lead to that agility point.
What are the biggest barriers between kind of that reality and today?
Connected systems. When you, as we do at Beacon, when you try and actually, and many tech businesses do, when you sort of slice your customer base, perhaps a bit too bluntly, but most businesses will take a sort of a pretty broad slice, and they'll put enterprise in one bucket and kind of SMEs and everyone else in the other bucket. And I think they are so separate and distinct. And the thing about the enterprise segment is that they tend to go after solving the problem for themselves, their use case. And the problem with that siloed approach is that you end up remaining quite siloed. When you have tech businesses who are taking more of an SME approach, more of a platform approach, by definition, you are thinking about the problems of more than one business. And it allows you to take a step back and look at these businesses as a collective and say, let's make a product that not only solves their discrete siloed problem, but let's also connect them all together so that you can actually join the dots and create this collaboration theme, which is this much bigger problem that enterprise companies don't like to acknowledge because they remain quite inward looking. They remain siloed in themselves. So I think that it really depends on what type of company you're looking at. But I think the way it manifests itself with companies large or small, no question, the need to have systems that are connected, where your data is free flowing between, let's use an example. It could be your ERP system, your CRM system over here with Salesforce or what have you, your ad tech platform here, all these different things. The interoperability of them is absolutely critical. And that's what leads to this sort of scalability of solutions and the speed of moving faster and this agility point and this predictive analytics point that I'm talking about, is that connected tissue between all of these different systems. With the SMEs, they all sort of sign up to the same platforms, Slack, for example. You've got that connective tissue between third parties, because if you're using Slack line, we can connect. If you build your own chat tool and you're a, fill in the blanks enterprise company, by definition are solving for a more discrete, less scaled, less scalable problem.
It's a really interesting analogy, and it kind of boils it down to something everyone can understand, that this is not a novel problem and it has been solved before in various different domains.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the SMEs tend to benefit, without realizing it, tend to benefit from adopting third-party technology that are solving these discrete problems. But the real kicker is that the ethos of so many, particularly SaaS platforms in the world, is to ensure that they can be integrated with other similar platforms that do different things. And it's that, again, that connective tissue that is absolutely game changing. And I think that's where enterprise companies often miss out on working with these sort of, again, more discrete, more integratable, if that's a word, solutions. And it just creates a different ecosystem of businesses. My third prediction is around AI and automation. And I sort of almost feel obliged to say something about AI because the whole world seems to be talking about it. And if I don't, then it's, it's sort of a gap. I think the prediction is, and I don't think this is sort of particularly, unique to me. We've had a pretty solid hype arrival of AI last year. I think a huge amount of excitement. I absolutely believe it is one of the most transformational, moments in humanity, quite frankly. But I think this is the year where the dust starts to settle a little bit, and businesses start to really look at ChatGPT, AI, and all these things, and go, okay, what does this actually do for my business now? It is great. It does amazing things. My goodness, it's great at spinning up a draft of my CV or whatever it happens to be. But what are we really doing? Like, how does it actually do something for my business? And I've certainly seen, lots of businesses start to sort of peel away the AI piece, and I equally see a lot of businesses still saying, we've got to say we do something in AI just for the marketability of it, even if it doesn't actually do anything meaningful for the business. But I think a bit of that reality is starting to enter the conversation. I know certainly at Beacon, our own conversations are around how can we actually take this stuff and apply it transformationally so that our business and therefore our customers' businesses are actually better, rather than let's just put a chat GPT box on our homepage and let customers ask a question. Because the truth is, you ask somebody to ask you a question and they'll look at you blankly and say, I don't know what to ask you because I don't have, it's too generic. Yep. So I think this is the year where we start to see a little bit more realism about how AI can actually be applied to everyday businesses.
What do you think that might result in terms of, I guess, both supply chain and the supply chain technology market?
Yeah. So I think in terms of supply chain itself, one of the things about supply chains, I think, that benefits AI as a broad solution is that it is very large, very complex, huge amounts of types of data, constantly changing. There are many, I mean, it's the ultimate sort of multivariate kind of equation. There are so many dimensions to what's going on. Supply chain is, all the way down, begins with, how many things do I need? Do I think my customers are going to buy? What things do I think they're going to buy? How long does it take to make these things? Who should make them for me? When should I order them? How many should I order? Who should I use to carry them? Which routes? Which warehouse? Where do I think my customers are? It's endless, endless amounts of data, all trying to be stitched together to allow businesses to more accurately predict when and what quantities they should order things and pay for things. Okay, so AI is just, is one of those themes in technology that's particularly good at ingesting huge sums of data with great complexity and starting to sift through that and make predictions and make recommendations. So I think supply chain is a really interesting one because there is so much data and there are so many different outcomes that you have to consider. So I think it's really interesting. I think there's still a big question around how do you accumulate all of that data in the first place? Obviously, no data, no AI. So I think that is still the big problem that is being solved. And I think supply chain data is becoming more prevalent and more structured, more organized. But I think that's what makes it interesting for AI. And also, I think that supply chains are so huge and underpin global economies. I think that it's always interesting when technologies can, move the proverbial needle. And I think it can have big impact on global economies. So I think it makes supply chain kind of an interesting vector for artificial intelligence.
What do you anticipate those effects to look like?
Well, hopefully it starts to help mute or dull the peaks and the troughs of the volatility that is being created by world events. What you're ultimately trying to do is flatten those curves, and that can come through technology that better prepares you for various scenarios, scenario planning. What should we do if we have to be reactive in certain situations? I think it's if you can flatten that curve at scale, and supply chains operate at scale, I think that can have a massive effect on just efficiencies, the waste that's generated by companies, by over ordering, the write-offs, the energy consumption. It's a huge amount of benefits that come from businesses becoming more productive and more efficient. Just efficiency gains all around, more profitable, better margins, less waste, less CO2, fewer CO2 emissions. The benefits are very meaningful.
Final question. do you think that point one conflicts with point three to a certain extent, in that we're seeing kind of a rollback of globalization to a certain extent, further fragmentation, more kind of national interests, yet we need to promote kind of the sharing and standardization of data for that reality to exist?
So I mean, my first point was really about the macro, situation, which I think is one of uncertainty and volatility, which I think is your point, which is some countries are becoming more inward looking, are becoming deglobalized, I guess, is the sort of the inverse of what's been happening for the last 10, 20 years. I think that is what creates uncertainty and volatility. Because you can't just jump to the end state of we are now deglobalized. It's the movement, the swing from one to the other that is the change. And it is that change that creates the volatility. So long as you get movement, either from globalization one way or the other, it's the change in sentiment and the change in behavior that creates this volatility, and therefore just precipitates the need for more data, more connectivity, so you can navigate it. Now, if we're talking about, deglobalizing in the sense of data sharing is no longer happening, or different systems are happening, you've got one country drives on the left and the other country drives on the right, so in a very simple sense, I think that definitely presents, challenges for the interoperability of countries, but I don't think it changes the thrust towards the interoperability of technologies, because I think those standards become established, and I think they're sort of inalienable in many ways. And so I think it's whether or not you get these inward-looking countries adopting the systems in the first place is the question. But are the systems interoperable, connected? Is the data standard consistent? I'm less concerned about that, because I think those are laws of nature rather than laws of society. And I think that there's just a natural state that makes sense for a lot of these technologies.